Today I'm doing a review of the M.Zuiko 100-400 f5 to 6.3. Now Olympus has kindly sent me this lens to test out for a couple of weeks. Just so everyone knows, I have no affiliation with Olympus. They've just sent me this lens to test out. So all the opinions of this lens are my own. As I've said before, I'm not very techie. I will start out with a few of the specs of this lens, and then we'll jump into how it performs in the field for me as a wildlife photographer. If you want to skip to a certain section that interests you more, you can check out the timestamps below and just jump to wherever you want to in this video. Now stay tuned to the end and I'll show you some of the better wildlife images that I've gotten with this lens over the couple of weeks that I've had it. First off, it's a 100-400 zoom, and as most people know, it's on a micro four third Olympus camera body, so it is cropped by a factor of 2, which makes it equivalent in 35mm frame to 200 and 800mm. So it gives you a very nice long reach for wildlife photography. The lens itself has image stabilization of up to 3 stops. It weighs just over 1 kilogram, and it's a very light and compact lens to just kind of put on your camera, throw over your shoulder, and take with you into the field. Now both the zoom itself and the focus ring are very smooth, and I have the 300mm, and this does feel like a pro lens. Now the lowest f-stop is 5. At 100, there's a few in-between steps, but when you have a fully extended to 400 or 800mm equivalent, that is f6.3. Now the weather sealing of this lens is actually the same as the Pro Series lenses. As long as you use it with a high-end Olympus OMD camera, it will be fully weather sealed. And I've tested it out in some nasty conditions. You can check out the video I did when I went out to photograph geese in the rain. Now this lens can be used with the teleconverters 1.4 and 2 by Olympus. And using this with a 2x teleconverter at 400, it becomes a 1600mm equivalent. Now, I've never tried that. I have a 1.4, so I've been using that every now and then, and it gives you a pretty good reach as well. The lens hood itself removes and comes off. It doesn't extend like some of the Pro lenses, and the manual focus doesn't have a clutch to switch it on or off. But to me, that doesn't really matter, and I think a lot of people actually turn that off because they don't like it. I personally like it, but it really doesn't bother me that it doesn't have one of this. I tend to use back button focus and always have manual focus available to me. If you want to check out a video for back button focus in Olympus system, you can check out that video here. All right, so we got the main specs out of the way. Now let's get into how this lens actually performs in the field for wildlife photography. Right off the bat, I really like this lens for wildlife photography. It has 2 things that I just love about it: being able to zoom back a little bit in the field. As a lot of you know, I often take images where I include more of the environment in my images, and I really like that. And being able to just pull back the zoom a little bit to include more of the environment in the field is such a breath of fresh air. I was up on the hills the other day photographing ptarmigans and mountain hares, and at first I was photographing ptarmigan as it was eating a little bit of vegetation. I was fully zoomed in on 400, and I filled probably half the frame of the ptarmigan, but then I could quickly just zoom back a little bit and include more of that rocky environment that I was in. Same thing with mountain hares. One of them actually ran straight towards me, and I wouldn't have been able to focus properly. It would have filled more frame than I would have had at 400, so I had to pull back a bit to actually include it in my frame. So having that adaptability and versatility is incredibly useful in the field for wildlife photography. This is the kind of lens that you just put on your camera, throw over your shoulder, and just go out for photography. Don't bring anything, you just don't think, you just go out and shoot what you want to shoot. Now the second thing about this lens is that 800mm equivalent is an amazing zoom. A lot of the times when I was out photographing, that allowed me to just stay back, photograph wildlife from a distance, and I would often photograph birds without actually getting into their circle of fear. So I could stand back a bit, take photos, and get pretty close up anyways without disturbing them, without flushing them further ahead. Now when it comes to sharpness, this is a sharp lens. But I do have to say, I'm used to using the 300mm f4 prime, and I know what you're all saying. Don't compare it to that lens because that's a prime lens and it's a much more expensive lens and it's an absolutely amazing lens. However, I'm just using it as a reference point because otherwise, how would you know what I think is good or not? So this lens is not as sharp as the 300 f4, or at least I cannot get images as sharp as a 300 as often with this lens. Saying that though, I have many sharp images and it is a really good lens, and you can check out more of my images at the end of this video to see what I got with it. Now, when it comes to autofocus, it does autofocus fast on subject. But again, for point of reference, because I've been using the 300 f4 now for probably 6 months, I'm just so used to it, putting this lens was a little bit, you notice a little bit of a lag period when it comes to autofocus. And again, this is just for point of reference. I'm not expecting this lens to be as good as that. But saying that though, it is very fast, and if you get used to using the focus ranges here, you will also see a significant improvement in how quickly it catches focus. So using the 1.3 to 6 meters if anything is close, and then quickly changing it to 6 meters to infinity when things are further away, you will really see some drastic results. So I encourage you to just start using that a lot more if you're using this lens. Now, one of the really cool things about this lens is using it as a Tele Macro lens. At 400mm and focusing at a minimum focus distance of 1.3 meters, you can get a magnification factor of 0.29. Since this is a Micro Four Third camera and it is crop times 2, is actually 0.57. Put on a 1.4 teleconverter and you got yourself a 0.81 magnification, and if you got a 2 times teleconverter, you actually get a magnification factor of 1.15, assuming you got the lens fully extended and at the minimum focus distance of 1.3 meters. And you can check out the video where I was photographing mushrooms using this gear in the field, and I had some incredible times with it. So again, a really adaptable lens. As good as this lens is, there is one main letdown of it. And for me, that is photographing in low light. So when you're at 400mm, the lowest you can get your f-stop is f6.3. Now combine that with the fact that even though this has 3 stops image stabilization in the lens, it doesn't synchronize with the in-body image stabilization like the 300 f4 and other pro lenses. It is a little bit more difficult to hold it steady, and you will have to start using higher ISO. And when I was out photographing early in the morning or late in the evenings, I found myself that when the light really died on me, I would often take my vlogging camera there, which is the EM5 Mark III. It is also on loan from Olympus, but I would attach my 300 f4 to that and continue shooting then, just because I wouldn't be able to get very decent images at that time when it's so low light. Saying that though, I have pushed this a little bit, and the other day I had a dipper. It was at the end of the day and I flushed a dipper from a stream, and it was further away, but with this lens it was still within reach to make some good images. However, after about 10 minutes of trying to capture some images of it further away, it actually flew over back to me and landed so close to me that I actually had to zoom back. I had to pull it back to probably like 250mm. So very carefully, I turned around as slowly as I could so as not to scare it. And I fired off a few frames, and I had to set my ISO to 3200, and I had a shutter speed of 1/50th of a second. Bear in mind though, I was leaning it on the ground, so I had some extra support, and I took a burst of shots, but quite a few of them came out sharp. So it is important to bear in mind that I've only had this lens for 2 weeks, and I've only had it out for a few days where I've just really intensely just used it. And sometimes you really don't get the most out of your equipment before you use it for months or years even. So it's important to notice that you might have better results than I have with this lens because you get to use it more, and you might just be better at it than me. The thing about the image stabilization does go on to video footage as well, because I do a lot of vlogging, and if you haven't seen my videos before, then a lot of the time I will take you guys with me out into the field for some wildlife photography, and obviously I will film the wildlife then as well. And I don't really like to carry tripods or anything like that, so almost all footage for my vlogs when it's up close of wildlife is shot handheld with the equipment that I'm using at the time. So So at 400, which is an impressive reach, and it's really fun to be able to use that, and I get some incredible close-up footage, but it can get a little bit shaky because the image stabilization doesn't sync with the body, which is what I'm used to with the 300, which you can see a lot of my videos where I use the 300 and I hand hold and the footage is a bit smoother. So you can check out the video that I did where I talk about the weather sealing. I photographed geese in the rain. So it is pouring down rain and I'm lying down, so that gives me a little bit of stability, but I feel like the footage is a little bit more shaky. Now you might be a lot more stable than me, but I struggle a little bit to hold it steady. Of course I could probably just go back to 300mm and make it a little bit easier for myself. Now, as I said, I don't really want to compare the lens to the 300. As I've been posting some photos on social media with using this lens, I have been asked some questions about it and which one I would pick for wildlife photography, the 300 or the Zoom 100-400, and how they relatively compare in the field. So I thought I would just give you my personal opinions about where I think this fits into your camera bag. First of all, if you want both and you can afford both, then why not? Because this is a great lens to have in your camera bag. Though I think that if you are very serious about wildlife photography and that is the main type of photography that you take, then I would stretch to the 300 f4. It is sharper, it's a bit faster, but you have to be prepared that that comes with limitations. It is a prime lens, you can't just zoom out, and it's not as adaptable in the field. But if you're serious about wildlife photography, I would stretch towards that lens. And the great thing about Olympus compared to other camera systems is that a zoom lens like this, at the time I'm filming this video, I think this lens is up new for maybe 1,000 or 1,100 pounds. And the 300 f4 is probably double that. However, if you can find a good deal used on the 300, which is what I did actually, you might be looking at only 50% more than this lens new. So that's how I see it. If you're very serious about wildlife photography, I would lean towards the 300. If you can afford both, hell, go for both, because this is a great adaptable lens to have. And partly for me as well is what I said, that I do a lot of vlogging in my videos and I like to hand hold. So that makes the 300 f4, which synchronizes with the in-body image stabilization, much more useful to me personally. Saying that though, if I could afford it, I probably would get both. However, bear in mind, this is before the 150-400 with the built-in 1.25 teleconverter has come out. So once that comes out, that might be a game changer for everything. So we'll see how that turns out, hopefully at the end of this year. Now, if you're new to my channel, my name is Espen, and this channel is all about wildlife photography. So check out this playlist where my subscribers voted for their favorite vlogs that I've made. So if you want to see more of my videos using this lens, check out the video where I photograph mushrooms, or check out the video where I was photographing this with this lens in the rain. Now, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.